When Traore stepped onto the tarmac in New Delhi, few noticed him. By nightfall, whispers raced through embassies and trading floors alike. A $14 billion grain deal had been signed in silence. Ships would sail from Indian ports to West Africa, not just with wheat and rice, but with leverage. Markets jolted, rivals blinked, and Traore's quiet smile said he knew exactly what he'd done. The shock wasn't the grain, it was the strategy. The deal cut out traditional middlemen, locked prices for a decade, and tied food security to new railways and ports. Farmers cheered, speculators panicked, and diplomats scrambled to read the fine print. Overnight, a nation once seen as dependent became a power broker with a seat at tables it was never invited to before. As the news went public, headlines screamed and analysts argued, but the real impact unfolded slowly. Stabilized food prices, shifting alliances, and a new South-South corridor of influence. Traore watched the world react, calm and unbothered. The deal wasn't just about grain, it was about rewriting who gets to feed the future, and who gets to decide. The real tremor came weeks later, long after the cameras had moved on and the talking heads had exhausted their outrage. It arrived quietly, in spreadsheets, shipping manifests, and the sudden rerouting of global grain flows. Insurance firms noticed first. Risk premiums on traditional Atlantic grain corridors began to rise, while rates along the Indian Ocean dipped unexpectedly. Something had shifted beneath the surface, and the numbers were telling a story no press conference ever could. Traore had anticipated this moment. In his office, far from the polished halls of global summits, a wall-sized digital map pulsed with data ports, rail lines, silos, weather systems, and consumption forecasts stretching a decade into the future. The $14 billion deal was only the visible tip. Beneath it lay a lattice of clauses that rewarded efficiency, punished speculation, and quietly encouraged cooperation among nations that had long been played against one another. Indian mills ramped up production with confidence they hadn't felt in years. Guaranteed demand meant long-term planning, modernized equipment, and better wages. Farmers who once feared volatile export bans now planted with certainty, knowing exactly where their harvest would go and at what price. In West Africa, storage facilities sprang up near inland rail hubs, reducing spoilage and stabilizing supply during lean seasons. For ordinary families, bread prices stopped swinging wildly. For politicians, excuses began to evaporate. Not everyone was pleased. In boardrooms across Europe and North America, executives studied the deal with thinly veiled alarm. The traditional playbook of buy low in surplus regions, sell high in deficit zones, skim margins through complexity was being rewritten in plain language. Traore's agreement favored transparency, data sharing, and direct state-to-state coordination. It didn't eliminate profit, but it narrowed the space for manipulation. Lobbyists went to work, warning of market distortions and geopolitical risks, but their words rang hollow against full granaries and calm streets. Behind closed doors, diplomats sought meetings. Some came with praise, others with thinly disguised threats. Traore listened to all of them, offering little in return. He understood leverage not as force, but as timing. Every week the deal functioned smoothly. Its legitimacy deepened. Every ship that arrived on schedule made it harder to argue that the old system was superior. Power, he believed, was most effective when it looked boring. A drought hit a major exporting region halfway around the world, the kind that usually sent shockwaves through commodity markets. Futures spiked elsewhere, panic buying followed, and headlines warned of shortages. Yet along the India-West Africa corridor, nothing changed. Prices held. Deliveries continued. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Nations once skeptical began asking questions not about ideology, but about replication. Could similar corridors exist for fertilizer, for fuel, for medicine? Traore's answer was always the same: stability first, then scale. He knew that hunger was not just a humanitarian issue, but a political weapon that had been used for centuries. Remove its volatility, and entire regions became harder to destabilize. Youth who might have been driven to desperation by empty shelves now planned futures that extended beyond the next meal. With food security came patience, and with patience came options. The most profound impact, however, unfolded in the realm of perception. For decades, Global narratives had cast certain nations as perpetual recipients of aid, of charity, of instruction. This deal shattered that framing. It wasn't a plea, it was a proposition. It wasn't charity, it was commerce on negotiated terms. Young policymakers, students, and entrepreneurs saw something new reflected back at them. Agency. Media outlets scrambled to catch up, reframing stories they had initially dismissed. Analysts who once scoffed now produced lengthy reports acknowledging the unexpected resilience of the arrangement. Some even admitted, begrudgingly, that the model reduced risk rather than amplifying it. The shock had evolved into curiosity, and curiosity into cautious respect. Late one evening, Traore stood alone on a balcony overlooking a city that buzzed with ordinary life via vendors calling out prices, buses coughing into motion, families sharing meals. This was the real metric, he thought, not GDP curves or approval ratings, but the absence of fear in daily routines. The deal had not solved every problem, and he never claimed it would, but it had proven something radical in its simplicity, that the rules were not immutable, and that even the most entrenched systems could bend when approached with clarity and resolve. Somewhere across the ocean, another ship docked, its holds full, its paperwork unremarkable. No ceremony marked its arrival, and that, perhaps, was the greatest shock of all.